Hello, and welcome to First Friday Fired Ups with the Art Alliance for Contemporary Glass. I'm your host, Dimitra Theophanis, and as many of you know, we host a new program in our Fired Up series on the first Friday of each month, exploring a new topic in glass art. On all other Fridays in the month, we host member meetups on Zoom, exploring a more extensive array of topics, including panels like this one on collecting. All of those videos get uploaded to our virtual video library on our website, which is private and exclusively for members only. You can log in anytime, anywhere, and enjoy hundreds of programs on the field of contemporary glass. To learn more and consider joining, please visit aacgglass.org. All right, I'm very excited to host another episode of our Collector's Edge series today with such an esteemed panel. I'm going to hand things off to our moderator, Brit Micho, curator of the Fort Wayne Museum of Art, so she can introduce the panelists and start the program. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will definitely get to them at the end of the session. All right, Brit, thank you and take it away.
Thank you, Dimitra. Well, again, welcome everybody. My name is Brit Micho. Today we have four wonderful panelists with us who will be answering serious questions about collecting both from the museum and gallery sides, as well as the individual sides. So we have Sarah Traver, President and Director of Traver Gallery in Seattle. We have Charles Shepard, who is President and CEO of the Fort Wayne Museum of Art. Jerry Paulson, longtime AACG member and collector, and Ray Chimienti, who is also a longtime AACG member and current board member and collector. So for our beginning question, this is really for anybody. Can you remember a moment when you knew you were searching for something new? What caught your attention and wouldn't let it go?
Well, I guess I'll chime in on that. For me, I'm always searching for something new. But as a collector, really, I think what catches my attention is something that I haven't seen before. I'm pretty familiar with glass, so it's usually a new process I'm not familiar with, or it could be a particular color that catches my eye. But for the most part, it's something that I'm not familiar with, that I haven't seen before.
I'd spend, I don't know how many hours a week on the internet trying to find new artists, artists whose names I don't recognize, whose work I don't recognize. And if that work is intriguing, I'll reach out to them or their gallery or whatever and explore, learn more, look at as many pictures as I can look at, and then kind of move on from there, deciding what I'm going to do.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, I'm going to speak more from the perspective of representing artists, but constantly looking and going down the rabbit hole on Instagram and online to see what people are up to. And recently been kind of focusing those searches on international artists working in glass. Really curious what people are doing outside of the States. And but just constantly keeping my eyes open and looking for something new.
Do you think that Instagram is the best of the social media platforms to try and find new things, new people?
For me, it is just because of the visual emphasis, I think. And certainly for the reels and being able to watch people kind of speak in brief about their work or demonstrate technique. I find it the easiest to use. I don't do a lot of searching on Facebook anymore, or I don't even use TikTok, to be honest with you, but yeah. And then from Instagram, I usually then go to a more deeper web search. It's not limited to Instagram for sure.
Thanks, Sarah.
I think I have the great advantage of not only, like you, Jerry, spending a lot of time online myself, but I've got 5 or 6 people in the curatorial department who are also constantly online and sending me messages, quick, go look this up. Take a look at this one. Take a look at that one. And that's It's really fun. It's like having a whole team chasing really cool things.
Yeah, that's really great. Is there anything in particular from more of like an individual standpoint, so Jerry or Ray, that you in your own collections that really caught your attention? What was like that really big first thing that caught your attention?
Go ahead, Jerry.
I've been collecting since 1980, so it's a little hard to remember what that um, first thing was. I do know that the first piece in my collection is a bud vase by Jack Brewer. Why in the world one brother gave another brother a bud vase? I certainly don't remember. Neither does my brother. Um, but that's still in a display cabinet, and that's what ignited now, 35, 40 years of following this medium.
I've been maybe not collecting as long as Jerry, but probably 30 years since the mid 90s. And it all started with a small vase, very small, that I found at a local art fair. I had no idea any about glass at all. But what really started it for me is when I went to, I bought my first major piece at Habitat Gallery. I happened to live 20 miles or so from it. So after that, then it kind of took off from there.
That's great.
Ray, my first introduction to glass altogether was at a show that Ferd organized at a little university museum in Michigan, uh, Howard Ben Trey. And I was looking, actually, I didn't know enough to look for glass at the time. This is 2013, 2014. I was looking for new forms of sculpture. And Howard's work knocked me out. And reading the label and finding out that it was glass really was a stunner for me, a wake-up call. So
Yeah,
I had to pursue after that everything Howard and everything glass.
it's funny you should say that because I had a somewhat similar experience at the beginning. I was just searching art galleries in the local area on the weekends. I had no idea about glass. I'd never heard of Habitat. And on the weekends, I would just go from one gallery to another, happen to walk in the door of Habitat, not knowing anything about glass. And it kind of opened up a whole new world.
Mhm. So where does that hunt usually begin for you now? And how is that different from 5 or 10 years ago?
For me, it starts somewhere coming across a website. I'm always searching on Facebook, um, or all kinds of auction sites, but it's always something online. It could be an email notification someone sent me, but it's mostly, well, it's almost always online, and it's mostly either an auction house or a reel that I saw on Facebook.
So, um, going back a little further than 5 or 6 years, um, there were more galleries, um, but two, at least for me, there was the annual sofa exhibition that, brought together so many galleries. I mean, I live here on the East Coast, and while I've had a, delightful in-person visit to Traver Gallery twice, I think. Um, that I can't get to theirs very often. I couldn't get to there 5, 10 years ago very often. Um, so SOFA was a marvelous opportunity, meet artists in person, see a huge range of work, get excited about this, that, or the other. Now, there is almost no other way than the internet. And, as I've already said, I mean, I just spend endless hours looking for something new.
Jerry, just chiming in on the sofa thing, I think that I really agree. I miss that so much, that opportunity to encounter in person so many different artists' work that I hadn't seen before, get to know those artists, get to know, their techniques and how they approach making and a little bit about their history. And it's hard to replace that with online viewing. I mean, it's not the same thing at all. And even although I spend a lot of time looking online and exploring what's out there, it's not that often that I will choose to represent an artist or buy a piece sight unseen. I do still, I mean, there's some sub that you can do to mitigate that, and do like Zoom calls and studio visits, and try and have videos of the pieces taken to get a sense of scale and form. But there's nothing that replaces seeing a piece in person for me.
Yeah.
Well, and I think SOFA provided that great social interaction with not only the artists, but with collectors, and the energy, at that show was so high. Just I think you could just ride the pure energy of that as you chased around to have another conversation and to look at another piece of art. There is no substitute. I mean, I think we all agree on that one.
Mm-hmm. So I know it's a bit different, museum versus individual, of course, but Ray and Jerry, how often do you go to the artist directly to purchase their work?
For me, I guess it kind of depends. If the artist is not sometimes I find an artist on the internet that's not represented by a gallery. So then I'll go to them directly. That just happened. As a matter of fact, without the internet, I might not have half the collection that I have. I just came across an artist a few months ago that was in England, and she has no representation, and I ended up buying a piece from her. So I do it when the artist is not represented, I guess, by a gallery.
Over the course of my collecting experience, we've done a lot of commissioned pieces to add to our collection. And some of that has been through galleries, but more recently, again, when I find somebody on the internet and can connect with them directly, there's a lot of back and forth, and like was already been said, talking to people or corresponding with people, getting pictures of existing work and getting to understand their process and their vision from their existing work, and then going ahead to ask them if they are willing to do commissions. Some aren't. And if they are, then proceeding with a commission directly from the artist.
Sarah or Charles, do you have any input from the more gallery or museum side about buying works directly from artists?
Well, yeah, I think we've got sort of the base mandate for us as a museum, and I guess we identified this as our base mandate, is that we're interested in the movement from 62 on. So you start with your known folks, and then we're very much into studying who those people taught and then who those people might have taught, to try to get the lineage, if you will, of the whole evolution of the glass movement. that drives a lot of our chases. One thing I've discovered in the last couple of years, though, is to be able to get on the phone with gallery folks, though. And Sarah, you gallery folks always have seen something before I have. And I want to know what you're seeing. What are you looking at? What are you excited about? Because I bet I'm going to get excited about it if you are. And I'm more apt to go, now maybe it's because we're an institution, but I'm more apt to take that path through a gallery or through chasing down somebody who fit into the historical matrix. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's not going to surprise anybody what my feelings are on that topic. I think buying directly from a gallery and working with gallerists who are representing artists and showing their work is a really important part of the ecosystem of, of art. And I think it can be a really great benefit to an artist to have a gallery be the sort of intermediary, particularly on commissions. And Jerry, obviously there are some artists that don't have representation, and working directly with them is a wonderful way to support them. And I think, when an artist does have representation, kind of respecting that relationship that they have with galleries and making sure to also support the gallery that supports the artist.
Well, Sarah, I think that it's something that is so important to the system that an artist, this is my perspective anyway, over a number of years of being in the business, but don't be a loner all the time, because in fact the system of galleries is set up to benefit everybody, and you'll meet more people and you'll have more followers if you follow that. And I think there's a great underestimation of all the work that you and galleries put into this whole endeavor, and I respect that highly. And I also suspect that you're going to see more people than I'm going to see. And I'm just, as I said before, dying to hear who that I don't know. And if I find somebody that has no representation, I love to introduce them to a gallerist.
Yeah, and that, I have to say, that actually is a really big way that we discover new artists, is through collectors or other artists or museum folks that are finding things, and then they bring them to us and say, hey, this is really interesting to me. I think you might think it's interesting too. There's no better recommendation than another artist or a collector or a curator saying, take a look at this. It's a shame that there are fewer galleries representing studio glass in America at the moment. That is a real issue. There's only a handful of us doing it meaningfully. But I do also think we're talking about artists who make physical objects that exist in the world, and for them to have a space where that can be shown and experienced and people can encounter it for the first time and have that moment of discovery is so important. And so to think about, buying from a gallery is as an essential piece of this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I have a bit of a three-parter question to go forward from this. So, sorry, Sarah, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what makes a buyer move forward with a purchase that they have not been able to see in person? What things seem important, and what things do buyers ignore when making that decision? And then what matters less than you thought it would?
So obviously we do a lot online at this point. And we work with collectors all over the world. And I'd say that the pandemic really shifted this in a big way in terms of people being comfortable buying work without seeing it in person. In general, my experience is that if someone's buying a piece by an artist whose work they have seen previously in person, it's so much easier because they have a sense of scale, they have a sense of the detail in that work, how the artist is making the piece. Take, for example, a piece of Preston Singletary's. If you've seen that in a museum or in another gallery or in somebody's home, and then you look at a picture of it, you have a point of reference. If you're seeing it for the first time and you see this beautifully illuminated sculpture on a dark background, and you haven't seen that in person, that's a mysterious object. It doesn't really, you don't have a good sense of what you're looking at just from a photo. So that, I think for artists that are fairly well established and have a collector base and collectors are familiar with, buying work online goes pretty well. We do a lot of, video calls. We do a lot of just taking video of the piece in the gallery with a person standing next to it. There's lots of ways that you can help people kind of understand what they're looking at. But for younger artists that don't have an established reputation or people haven't seen their work in galleries, that's a much harder thing, I think, in my experience for people. Now, I'm really happy to hear Jerry and Ray say that they're willing to take risks on artists that don't have representation and whose work they haven't seen in person. I think that's amazing. But I think that's a rarer thing. Most folks are like, I don't know exactly what I'm looking at. I think I'll wait to see it in person. So.
I suspect, to follow up on that, Sarah, I suspect many of us have had the experience of buying a piece of art from an emerging artist, whether it's coming through a gallery or from that individual, and then not having that person emerge. And, you liked the piece, you still like it in your home, but there was no evolution, you know, beyond, or very little beyond, very little development in that artist beyond the time that you encountered them. It happens.
It does. It does happen. Again, I think that's where galleries can be really helpful. They usually do a lot of research and try and bring in artists that really are committed in their careers and work, and that they, and that the gallery is going to put a lot of work into as well in terms of marketing and developing a collector base. And but it does happen, and that's why you should buy work that you love.
For me, I have purchased pieces that I have not seen in person before. And what makes me move forward with that process is usually the trust that I have established in either the artist or the gallery and the relationship I built up with them before that purchase. Usually you could see a photograph of it, but it's like Sarah said, it's not the same as seeing it in person. Early on, I purchased a piece from England, and it wasn't, the artist was not represented in the US. And I didn't really understand the scale of the piece until I received it. And it was probably 1.5 times larger than I thought, which turned out great, but didn't quite know that at the time. And as far as like what I would consider when making a decision, for me, it's all important. I consider everything from if I'm buying an auction, the buyer's premium, shipping costs. And I collect art in general. It's not always glass art. So it could be something that may need restoration, may need framing. How am I going to install it? Or who can I get to install it? So I consider all that usually before I make a purchase, because you don't want to have any bad feelings about it, or you don't want to have a piece that now you don't know how to install it, or you don't know what to do with it. It doesn't fit. So,
in our situation at the museum, I think that we try to know the work, as you were referencing a minute ago, Sarah. We try to know the artist and know something about the body of work. So if it's a work that we haven't seen, you're right, we have a context then. Our responsibility is fraught, though, with the understanding that we are spending money that people have donated to us to make good decisions and theoretically mistakes should never happen. When they happen, it's always embarrassing and awkward. And if it's a real big mistake, it's career threatening. So we try to be very cautious and investigate deeply, but it just isn't always possible to see work ahead of time. But if you do some homework and talk to some people, particularly if somebody else has seen it and you say, you can trust this work, it's this and that and the other, we'll bank on that.
You know, in this post-COVID time, I'm not sure that I've purchased any work that I've seen before. I mean, I've certainly purchased work of artists whose body of work over time I know and have seen, but you know, galleries, you know, will take pictures that they don't already have on their website. They will take videos. You know, as Sarah said, you can have somebody standing next to, or you can have, you know, a yardstick that somebody holds while the video is being taken, or something like that. So I do think it's extremely important to gather as much detail and you know, getting a sense from the gallerist of where this person's work might fit, you know, sort of within the bigger sort of glass movement, I think is also extremely helpful.
So off of all of that information that we just got from the four of you, you all kind of touched on this. So what, especially in this digital environment, what builds trust and what erodes trust with assets?
Well, for me, probably the biggest thing that would build trust is the communication, whether it's a gallery, an artist, an auction house. For me, it'd be the communication I've had with them and the relationship I built up with them. And it's kind of not just communication in general, but it would be the level of communication, the details in how they communicate, how their response time is, how difficult it may or may not be to contact them. To me, that all plays a part in building up trust in that person or that gallery or that auction house.
For me, it's same. I mean, communication. You know, I'm sort of working on the opposite end of it, right? But I usually like to try and have a phone call or a Zoom call with a collector, with an artist, so that there's a real direct communication. We can really get to know each other. Email's great in terms of like sending details and making sure there's a record and things are communicated clearly, but I don't think anything replaces just being able to chat and kind of hear each other's voices, understand where other person is coming from, what it is that they're looking for, and be able to ask questions of each other, and then follow up with the email stuff and the tear sheet and the images and all of that other detail.
I would agree that the communication is very important, and I would add to it that at least in our case, we reach out frequently to other artists who we think may have worked or worked near or know something more than we know about the artist we're looking at. How do the peers feel about, how do the colleagues feel about this work and this person? And we get some interesting responses there.
I think particularly in this day and age, as the world of galleries has unfortunately shrunk, that the you know, the survivors, if you will, come with a sort of, I don't know, a supposition of trust, because they are a successful business in what is obviously a very difficult business environment. And if they didn't treat their clients well, they didn't treat their artists well, they wouldn't be there. And a lot of people aren't there, and it's not because they didn't treat their people well, but that's a different unfortunate problem. So I think galleries, you know, uh, as a collector, I think one should have a feeling of trust with going to almost any gallery and, calling or emailing and saying, I'm interested. I saw this on your website. Can you give me some more information? And, I've, I've never not had a response. Um, and, you know, I think the main thing going directly to an artist who might not have representation, um, I've sent emails and nothing's come back, and it's like, well, okay, I'll look at the pictures, but that's all I can do.
I have a question for you guys. How important is it that a gallery's website have transparent pricing?
For me, that's very important. And I realize a lot of times galleries will say, price upon request. And I think maybe that's done to get the collector or the person who's interested engaged in calling the gallery and having a conversation about it. But sometimes I wish it was a little bit more transparent because maybe it's not a price range I'm comfortable with, and that I feel then I'm wasting the gallery's time.
I would say that when I encounter, as Ray was saying, that little box that says information on request, it's extremely frustrating. It's extremely off-putting. Um, just put it all out there. I'm not quite sure why galleries don't um, show the prices, and I'd be interested to hear. But I find it really frustrating.
It's a topic of a lot of discussion, and I'm really happy to hear your feedback. I think it's just sort of a change in best practice. For a lot of artists, it's a little scary to put their prices out there, and some artists don't want to do it. Mostly, I think, because of how their peers respond to it, not necessarily collectors, which is sort of an interesting thing. But from my perspective as a gallery, increasingly, I'm like, this is how people engage in collecting and in gathering information and their research. We need to be able to put it out there and be direct with people and transparent about what things cost, because as both of you said, like, you're collectors, you're doing your homework, you know what you want and what you're willing to spend, and better to have the information than not, in my opinion.
So Sarah, I didn't know that some of that was based on the artist's decision to have it.
In my case, it's entirely based, like, if you see price upon request on my website, it's because the artist has specifically requested that we not display the price.
It's good to know. I just assumed, like I said, it was the gallery wanting the collector to call so they could have a dialogue and engage and explain the piece and so
I think
on.
historically that has been the case, Ray, and there is definitely, I still hear gallerists say that is sort of their reason for doing that. But as there are more and more platforms like Artsy and ArtNet and galleries that have the buy now button on their website, it seems silly to not have prices listed to me.
So if we go on talking about risk and responsibility and whatnot, what's a risk that you're glad that you took with collecting, with purchasing a work, and what's one that maybe didn't work out for you, a risk that you took, and why is that?
Well, for me, it kind of maybe goes back to the piece I mentioned before. As a matter of fact, I'm looking now, happens to be a piece in one of the niches behind me. But It's the piece that I bought from this artist in England. I had never heard of her before. I never saw her piece in person before. I knew no one that knew of her or no one that collected her work. So that was pretty risky for me. It's not like I was buying it from a gallery down the street. It's coming halfway around the world. You're paying for shipping and crating and all that. And that turned out to be a very pleasant surprise. I think there's only been one time that I bought something that I'd not really seen before that didn't really work out. And the artist was very good about it and allowed me to return it. But that, in all my years of collecting, I think that's only happened once. Because I usually do a pretty good job of doing my homework beforehand, trying to find out whatever I can find out.
I think it's obvious that when you do commissioning, you don't know what you're going to get till you see it. And my wife and I have done quite a bit of commissioning for objects in our home, not just glass, but dining room tables and coffee tables and all sorts of other things. And it's I think there's been one time that I really wasn't happy, and in that case, I wasn't able to do anything to mitigate my distress, but every other time that we have done a commission or purchased from an artist who doesn't have good representation, it's always worked out, and I think Ray's experience, whether you're receiving a piece from a gallery or an artist, hopefully, if you're willing to pay the shipping to get it back to them, and you get it back to them, obviously in the same condition that you received it, then hopefully they ought to be, willing to take the object back. They're not, if you pay the shipping back, of course, they're not out of pocket because you paid for the shipping to get it to you, and then they can put it back up and sell it to somebody else, and that's obviously perfectly fine. I now, thinking back a long time ago, I I can think of a piece we bought. We took it back. We got a different piece that we liked much better, kept for many, many, many years, and then later saw the piece we returned in a friend's home. And, different people have different taste. But the fact that the gallery can, put it back on the market, or the artist can put it back on the market, hopefully that makes it all fine.
I did want to mention one thing about when you mentioned, Brett, about risk taking. And I too, Jerry, I've commissioned many pieces. Matter of fact, right now, currently, I have two pieces that are being commissioned. And what I do is I do a very detailed outline of the piece, from anything you can imagine, from color to size to what's ever entailed. And I have a lot of conversations with the artists about it. I'll type up this outline, I'll send it to them, and we go over it. Yep, I understand what you want now. So that has really helped. And that'd be my advice to anyone if you want to kind of reduce the risks on something that you may not have seen before, or something that you're commissioning and it's somewhat new.
From the gallery or museum perspective, Sarah, Charles, do you have any input on any risks that you're glad you took, or ones that you didn't?
risks that I'm glad I took. I mean, yeah, there are some times when I'm working with an artist that is overseas and all we can do is a Zoom call and I can't see the work in person and I say, ship me a piece. And I can't tell you how many times we've done that and I have been delighted. And again, a lot of that is doing your homework and looking at a lot of images and getting to know the artist. What I will tell you a funny story. When we started representing Mel Douglas's work, I'm sure many of you are familiar with her work. Australian artist, incredible sculptor, and she does these pieces that are quite illusory. They look like dimensional objects. I had seen images of the pieces that she was sending, and they, in the images, obviously were bowls. And then she sent them, and they arrived in boxes that were flat. And we opened them, and totally surprised. Like, I thought I had had a million conversations with her. I knew exactly what I was getting. And no, it was, and they were delightful and absolutely exceptional artworks. And we've developed an incredible relationship. And so that was a good surprise for sure. But sometimes, an image looks like something that it's not.
Well, I guess from the museum side, we don't commission that many things. It's probably something every couple of years from some artist, usually a three-dimensional artist. In the case of glass, I don't think we've commissioned anything really. So we're reacting to things that we've heard about or we've seen or that are, arrive at auction. So I think in terms of risks that have made me happy, sometimes in fact, this happens fairly frequently, we will chase down someone who had a wonderful and reasonably famous teacher, and then 2 steps later, the student has now become the artist and is doing well, and we don't know the work as well, but because of the lineage, we take a gamble, and I would say that 99% of those have come out to be wonderful surprises, and we're so happy we took the risk that it's a thing of joy. I will tell you in a different medium, working with a terrific woodworker from whom I did commission a piece, a rare thing. I commissioned a big conference table that I'm looking at right now, and I failed to see. I love the guy. I love the work so much. The wood, I failed to see that he didn't understand how to put legs on the wood. And we had to turn that into a happy thing by sort of gently coaching him on how you could put a much more beautiful set of legs on this absolutely stunning coffee table that I was so enthusiastic about because the pictures only showed the tabletop. So a lesson learned, but we were able to pass that lesson on to the artist, and I think he sold more tables as a result.
My next question is a little bit more towards Jerry and Ray. What point does your collecting shift from a personal excitement to a sense of responsibility? And how does that affect your decisions?
Well, for me, I'm always excited to collect art. It's my passion, been doing it for decades. But as what's changed for me as recently is I'm reevaluating my collection, and I'm trying to collect pieces that will elevate it. And I've been selling pieces that maybe I collected early on that are still nice pieces of art, but they don't I don't have the room for them anymore, they don't fit the collection, or I don't have the same interest in them. But I guess I'm always excited about collecting, but now I'm collecting with a different purpose in mind, and that purpose is to elevate the collection as I think I want it to be.
For a long time, my wife and I have been deaccessioning. Every time we find an open space, we seem to find something else to cover that open space. So I don't know that our collection has decreased in size that much. But we've been very intentional in reaching out to museums and trying to get them interested in some of the pieces in our collection. And we've been successful in placing pieces. It's wonderful to sort of have that affirmation that, we love these things. We've had them in our house for however many years we've had them in our house. And then somebody else with a much different eye and a much different collecting purpose comes along and finds that a piece in our collection helps them tell the story of art made in glass. And so our children have no interest in what we have. And so at the end of time, whatever we haven't been able to give away to museums will go to auction, and whatever will be will be. Unlike Ray, I've not tried to sell anything at this point. It's really just been trying to get museums to come and take a look, and happily we've I don't know, donated probably 30 or more pieces over time to several different museums.
Karen, I have to use your comments as a springboard, because at the museum, I will tell you, that's how we've built a high percentage of our collection. People like yourself who've collected and who are going to deaccession a piece, and they may be pursuing something else, but that piece may be perfect for us. We field 2 or 3 calls a week for sometimes individual pieces and sometimes small or larger groupings of pieces. And it's meant the world to us building as encyclopedic a collection as we can. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, we're going to go to our last question before the Q&A. So what is one thing you wish somebody had told you earlier about collecting in today's world?
Well, one thing I wish someone would have told me, maybe not in today's world, but about collecting, I didn't think it was going to be as much of a passion as it turned out to be, and I didn't think I was going to be have this addiction to it. So that came as a big surprise. It would have been nice to know that one. But when I first started collecting, especially glass art, there was a seasoned collector, and I knew nothing about glass art at that time. There was a seasoned collector that gave me a little bit of advice that has proven well, and I still stick by it. And I was told to, number one, buy something that you really love. Don't buy because of an artist's name or because of any other reason. Because you have to live with this piece. You're going to live with it in your home for a long time. So you really have to have a love for that piece. And the other thing I was told, and this is true kind of along the same line, is to buy for quality and not quantity. So, and that's what advice I would pass on to someone else that's collecting.
I would certainly ditto everything that Ray has said. And the only other thing I think I would add that I sort of wish people had told us, and I will now tell whoever else is on this call, trust yourself. If something speaks to you, it's speaking to you. And whether it's a famous artist or a relatively unknown artist or something that's not in, not in the usual line of what a particular artist makes. If you like it, trust yourself. As Ray says, you're going to live with it. Um, and, once you get it home, if you like it, who cares what anybody else thinks? So trust yourself.
Great advice.
That just made me think of something, Jerry. The other thing I would say is, and this is, I happen to be a retired designer, so coming from a design point of view, I hear people say, "Oh, I love this piece of art because it matches my wallpaper or it matches my sofa." And I would never suggest buying any piece of art to match anything. I think that's the wrong focus, and I don't think you have the right appreciation for the piece if you try to match it to your sofa. Um, in my home, I have all kinds of pieces, and I still think they fit well together. Nothing. I don't purposely try to match anything to something in the home.
I I have an interesting sort of story there. I absolutely agree, and I've never ever bought a piece because it fit with the decor, but a, a recent piece came. I uncrated it. I put it on a pedestal. It looked very good, so I decided I was going to leave it there. And I turned 180 degrees to look at the wall behind me, and the colors that I had on the wall from 30 years ago, a piece of art that we purchased 30 years ago. I mean, it was almost like it was a perfect match. And it was totally unintentional. Um, and it was totally unintentional even once I got it at home. I had to do musical chairs as we often have to do. And I moved a bunch of stuff around, and this was the place where it was going to go. And then I turned around and saw what I saw. So I agree with Ray.
Yeah, I think from my experience, I agree with everything you guys are saying too. And I so appreciate what you're saying in terms of trust yourself and don't buy art to match your furniture or your wallpaper. And in my experience, when you do trust yourself, you'll find that a thread emerges or a common appreciation for color or light or qualities emerges naturally because you're the same person buying this stuff. You have a point of view, you have an aesthetic direction that you lean in, probably, or things that are interesting to you. And when that emerges naturally, it's a really wonderful thing to discover, I think. And I see that all the time when I go into collectors' homes and see what the collections that they have built over time. And suddenly you're like, oh, this person loves like narrative work. They love the stories, or this person is all about the relationships with the artist and the community that they've discovered through the work or through a gallery. And that also then, I think, extends to what a museum might be interested in collecting. When a collector has that story or that thread that they're following, that becomes really interesting to a museum, in my experience. And Charles, correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of what they might want to take on for their own collection. So,
well, I would agree with you heartily. And in fact, one of the most exciting things we find is that any little snippets of a story, or more than snippets, is entirely interesting to our public. They not only want to see a beautiful piece, but they want to know more. They want to know stories. They want to know what we know about the collector. They want to know what we know about the artist, and they will stand, for quite some time if you have another story to tell. So it has resonated and does resonate with everyone.
Charles, if I may, we do have an exhibition up right now that is actually a collector's, Dina and Ralph Lowenbach their whole collection that was gifted to us. We have highlights from them out in an exhibition right now. And all of our extended labels and panels are all about their collecting journey and why they chose these pieces. What drew them to the piece? Was it just the piece itself? Was it the relationship with the artist? Like what about this piece? What's the history specifically through that collector's lens? So that is a good point that everyone brings up. But
Perfect.
now I will switch it over to the Q&A, and I'm just going to be going through and reading some of the comments in the messages. So Howard Cohen has asked, has being deeply engaged with such a welcoming community influenced your life and interests?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? It didn't come clearly.
Has being deeply engaged with such a welcoming community influenced your life and interests?
I mean, I'll take that one. 1,000% yes.
Yeah.
Steeped in this world, have been since I was a baby. And yes, I mean, I was over at Chihuli's studio yesterday with some clients, and just the ability to, I mean, it's such an incredible community, and to be able to share some of those stories with people who don't know them, and share Dale's history and the number of artists whose life he's impacted, and how many of those artists we represent in the gallery. I mean, I can't say enough about how much this community has shaped my life and my interests. Absolutely.
I have to agree with Sarah there. And in fact, I want to say that since my immersion in art of all kinds predated my knowledge at all of glass, I found glass collectors and glass artists and the whole glass community to be the most warm, engaging, and just beautiful group of people compared to any other group of artists I've ever worked with. It's really a joy every day. If
I've
only
been a
printmakers and
member,
painters could be so happy.
yeah, I've been a member and on the board, president of the James Renwick Alliance. I've been a member of the AACG and on its board a long time ago. I've traveled with those groups sometimes. I've traveled on trips that galleries have put together. As people were saying, when we could get together at SOFA, it was like homecoming. So this community is an amazing community. I'm not engaged with any other art form, although we have a few pieces of this and that in the house, the way Ray is. So I can't compare and contrast. But it's been a huge part of our lives, our friends, how we travel, all that sort of stuff, um, has been, in some measure, the glass world.
I'd have to say ditto to all those comments.
Yeah, I mean, it really, I love what you're saying, Jerry, about how you travel. And I mean, anywhere you go, you'll find glass and you'll find glass artists, and immediately you have a point of connection. Like there's a new relationship that develops anywhere you go. If you find a glass blowing studio, if you find a cold working studio, if you find a kiln shop, I mean, it's all, it's a worldwide community. It's very close knit, and it's a really special thing.
And
Absolutely.
these Friday gatherings that AACG has sponsored, that we're all here today, help maintain that community at a time when, we don't have SOFA, et cetera, et cetera. So I think these activities on the Fridays, aside from just, whatever all else AACG means to all of us as an organization, I think these meetings specifically are extremely helpful in maintaining those connections, that community.
Yeah.
I'll just add one comment to that. Talk about the community of collectors. The Art Alliance for Contemporary Glass has a travel network. where people open up their homes. One time I was traveling to Europe, never been to that country, knew no one there. I looked up a glass collector, contacted them, asked them if I could visit. And it was like, meeting an old friend because you immediately had something in common.
That's wonderful. We have another question here from Howard that says, I'm curious if a collector is interested in buying something online, would the gallery be willing to have the collector talk to the artist?
I'll take that, I think.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
for sure. Yeah, we facilitate conversations all the time. Absolutely. Like, we want you to build a relationship. We want you to know whose work you're buying, whether it's through a Zoom call or a phone call or an in-person meeting. Yes, absolutely. That's so much of collecting is the relationships that you're building with the artists and knowing who made this work and why they made it and what they're thinking about when they make it. And yes, absolutely. That is our role, is to connect you to that individual.
Jerry or Ray, have either of you gone through that specific process?
Do you repeat what the process is? I didn't catch it.
Sure. Just being able to go through the gallery to talk to the artist.
I don't know that I've ever specifically asked a gallery for that privilege, so I don't have much to say.
I'd say the same thing. No, I haven't had that experience.
Well, it's nice to know that it's at least there as an option. So thank you, Sarah. And we have a question from Judy Cushman. Can you talk about what, if any, international markets are you seeing growth? Has the Corning expansion and the opportunity for artists to have residencies there had any impact?
From a collecting standpoint, I don't really have any knowledge of that with Corning, so I don't know.
I'm hearing some wonderful things about the expansion of their kiln studio and what Richard's doing there. I know Preston is going to go do some casting over there soon. Corning's just an incredible resource for artists. Absolutely. That makes a huge impact. And there's artists coming from traveling internationally to work in the Corning studios all the time. And then once they're here in the States, traveling and visiting galleries and visiting other studios. So yes, I would say absolutely, for sure.
I don't know that I would say specifically that there's a market, if the questioner is meaning something like an aggregation of artists or galleries or whatnot. Obviously there are a tremendous number of artists in the Czech Republic, et cetera, et cetera. There are European galleries whose emails I follow faithfully and whose websites I look at frequently. I can't say that on any other continent that I've done that, but certainly galleries in Europe I follow closely in some instances.
So our next question is for Sarah from Linda Green. Have you helped clients place glass in their homes, and any tips for collectors on the best way to place their pieces?
Yes, definitely. I like to help collectors place pieces in their homes. And as far as tips, it really depends on the piece, Linda, but glass loves natural light. So what you can do to get it near light is always something that I'm looking for. I definitely will work with clients on Zoom too and take a look at the space and try and help think about a solution, or explore a piece in the gallery and see where it seems to be the most dynamic setting and then make a suggestion based on that.
Awesome. And then I think our last question that we can squeeze in here is from Karen Beckfield. She said that collectors and artists alike deeply miss the connections fostered at SOFA. Are there any upcoming shows or alternative opportunities to connect like SOFA?
The only one
Not
that
that
I
I
would
know
know of.
of. I mean, there are some, there's Art Miami, and there are some glass artists and glass galleries that go to Art Miami. I have no idea what there might be on the West Coast or elsewhere in the country.
The Seattle Art Fair places something of an emphasis on glass and material-based work. It's not by any means SOFA in terms of the number of galleries that are representing glass, but they have been making an emphasis, placing an emphasis on that. And Corning has come out for the last couple of years and done a booth, and Montague was there last year, and so that there's some sort of energy there. And then I think the Fog Fair in San Francisco often has glass in it. But no, I mean, there's not another SOFA, unfortunately.
David Patchen in the comments is over here saying exactly what I was thinking. The gas conference at Corning every year is a really good chance. So he said there's lots of demos, lots of opportunities to meet artists. And then, of course, there is the Habitat show in Detroit as well.
That's what I was going to mention. They have, for me, living in the Metro Detroit area, it's one of the biggest shows of the year.
Yeah.
The big problem is that there's often a conflict between events in terms of dates, and it would be really nice. We have the James Renwick Alliance Craft Weekend, which is exactly the same weekend as the latter part of Habitat. And it's so frustrating because when you have to choose and you're on a committee, what you want and what you can do may not coincide. So if there was a way to have more collaboration in that way, that would really help me. And I'm sure some other people.
Great observation.
Say the other opportunity is if more collectors show up to Refract, that could be a really incredible gathering place for glass in the US as well. So there's so many studios here in Seattle. There's so many opportunities. And if the collectors show up, it will change the dynamic of that event in a major way.
Well, thank you everybody for your questions. My quick closing to everything is just that, one of the things that has really come through today is that collecting hasn't become less personal in the digital age. It's just become more intentional. That discovery may start on the screen, but the decisions still rest on instinct and education, trust, and relationships. So through today's panel discussion, it's evident there's no one way to collect, whether you're starting your own collection, continuing to collect, or simply interested in how all of this works. We hope that this panel has shed us some light on those different approaches to that journey. So thank you for letting me moderate, and I'm gonna hand it back over to Dimitra, and thank you to all of our panelists as well.
Thank you, Brit.
Thank you so much. I want to thank our panelists for sharing their experiences so generously and our audience for being a part of the conversation. We really hope it offered some insight on the digital collecting environment, which I know is going to continue to evolve. This panel discussion will also be posted on AACG's YouTube channel, so you can watch it again or share it with your friends. And we will be rolling out more of our Collector's Edge program this year exclusively for AACG members. So if you like this program and would like to see more, we do hope you will visit aacgglass.org and become a part of AACG's growing worldwide community. All right, I'm going to stop the recording now, and people are welcome to stay on and unmute themselves and continue the discussion if they would like.
Is the cat a collector?